Welcome to Passion for Christ. I'm with my friend Pastor Logan, and he's the pastor for Crosspoint Church. I'm going to have him explain what Crosspoint Church is all about, where they're located. And so, Pastor Logan, thank you for being on Passion for Christ. Share with our listeners a little bit of the history of how this church movement came about here in Utah.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me. So I'm from North Carolina. I moved to Utah as a church planner almost 11 years ago now, and we came to Provo. That's where I live. I've lived here the whole time, and basically just started a traditional style worship service in a hotel. We were meeting in the conference center for 5 years, I think, or around that 5 years. Doing setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, week in and week out. At that point, 5 years in, a friend of mine who actually lives outside of Salt Lake City, or lived outside of Salt Lake City, lived in Taylorsville, said, "Hey, I'm kind of reaching the end of my rope here. I'm kind of burned out. I'm going to go back to Arkansas. I'm going to leave." He'd been here 12 years, I think, at that point. Again, they had a big building across from City Hall. They were doing a traditional style church service. But he said, and I was like, I don't know if I want to. Man, I don't know if I want to just quit what we're doing here and take over what you got going there, which of course is what he was inviting me to do. And I said, I don't know if that's for me. He said, well, no, I want you to consider going multi-site, like you merge the two congregations, rebrand it, however, and then you just you have basically two campuses. And so we thought about it, had a real quick turnaround. From the time he even pitched the idea to the time that he moved away was a month. And so there was not a whole lot of preparing ourselves for that, but we did step into it. So we rebranded the church. Of course, now it's Crosspoint, and I was preaching up there Sunday mornings, come down to Provo. I would preach down here Sunday nights. Of course, that merger allowed us to get a building in Provo, so we had two buildings. I ended up hiring some part-time staff, had a worship leader going back and forth. We had a campus pastor at each location, and did that for 3 years. And so 8 years into Utah, 3 years in multi-site. I remember one Sunday just really feeling, I've described it in the past as just like a holy discontent. Like God just kind of stirred my heart, because what I was reading in Scripture. And then I'd lift my head up and I'd look out at our church, and it's just there was this huge disconnect. I wasn't seeing the same thing. I was seeing basically what a lot of pastors lament. I was seeing a lot of spectatorship. I was seeing a lot of consumerism. I was seeing a lot of just indifference. I'll just show up when it's convenient, when it's beneficial to me. And I was like, we've got to do something else. And so at that point in my mind, I was thinking, we'll just correct it. Like the answer's like a new sermon series, right, or a new program. So we begin preaching on all the one another commands in the Bible, what it means to be part of a body. We begin preaching on the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, and preaching on neighboring and all this kind of stuff, and working through it. And it's just, man, it wasn't clicking. So I began to preach through the book of Acts, just verse by verse through Acts. And I remember getting to Acts 17, and in Acts 17 you've got the disciples in Thessalonica, and they're drugged before the authorities. And there's an accusation laid against them, and they're accused of turning the world upside down. And all they were doing was making disciples. And yet, it was so disruptive. It was so just contrary to the way of life there, that the only way these Gentiles, these unbelievers, could describe it was they're turning our world upside down. And I remember reading that and then preaching through it. And I just told our church, like, no one would ever accuse us of this. Like, no one, like, we're not turning Utah upside down. No one's coming and saying, man, they're over there at Crosspoint, they're turning the world upside down. So no one would accuse us of this. And so I think at that point, I realized we had to make some deep changes beyond just maybe kind of addressing some of these surface issues and changing things up with different sermon series and stuff. So we actually got rid of both our buildings, and we moved into a network of house churches. And it was all like theory to us. It was all new to us. None of us had ever done it. None of us had ever seen it. We just had read some things. Of course, we're seeing some stuff in the Bible that is absent from our lives and gatherings. And so we know there's some a direction to go. And so we moved into house churches. And that first year, we kind of floundered around, and it was a huge learning curve. And it was still very much dependent on me. Like, we went from two house churches right away. We quickly added a third one. Over the next, I think, 6 months, we added a fourth one. We were preparing for a fifth one by the end of the year. And I was like, this is great. Then I realized I had to go to all of those. Like, I was going to 5 churches in 5 different cities on Sunday. And it was like, this is not, it was ridiculous. So what I realized was that even though we're pursuing this deeper intimacy with Christ, and we're pursuing disciple making, and we're wanting to impact the lostness, right? We're wanting to turn Utah upside down. I was like the cap for it, or the bottleneck. Like I wasn't releasing things. I wasn't equipping people. We were just kind of spreading out, and so we backtracked and resorbed some of those churches. And of course, we burned people out. I mean, it was, like I said, a huge learning curve. But what we ended up moving into is where we're at now, is this recognition that every single one of us has been gifted to serve and build up the body. And every one of us has been given the command and the authority to make disciples. And so there's this contribution to the church, and there's this commission, this mission as we go home into our neighborhoods, into our respective cities and counties. And so we really have pressed into that, training people, equipping people to live out, to engage others. So it's not like someone with an unbelieving family member or friend or coworker, they're not having to bring them to me. They know how to engage that person to the point of sharing the gospel, baptizing them, defining them on their own. I mean, they know that process. And even in our gatherings now, contributing, and not just it's not just me with a smaller group of people around me. It's if you were to come to our gatherings, you may not even pick up the ones that I'm at now. You may not even pick up the fact that I'm one of the leaders, because the other people are stepping in and taking responsibility. And so we're now networked with other house churches across the valley. We've got 7, I believe, going right now on a weekly basis. And of course, we've got a number, I want to say closer to 10 or 11 right now, like discovery studies, Bible studies with new believers or unbelievers, with the goal of they're on a pathway where down the road here, the next couple of months, they may turn into churches, or those believers may join up in one of our existing churches or even another traditional church in their area. But the idea is we are seeing growth and multiplication. In fact, even this last season, so I've been in Utah, like I said, going on 11 years. That first 8, I mean, before, so while we were in the buildings, while we were multi-site, while we were in the hotel, I could maybe count on one hand how many people came to faith and were baptized, which is just ridiculous. And then, but this last season, across our network now, this last 12 months, we've seen 56 people profess faith, so new believers, and that follow through immediately with baptism. So we've seen 56 people come to faith and be baptized, and now dispersed across our network in these different Bible studies and home churches. So it's been a completely different thing going forward here. And our goal now, I mean, especially me, what do I see? I mean, I want to see more people equipped and released. I want to train laborers up. I want to network with not just the house churches, but we're seeing even greater opportunity now to network with more traditional churches, legacy churches, and giving them some of the tools they can give their people. And I want it to be said of us. I want it to be said of the believers as a whole in Utah. They are turning Utah upside down.
Right. So at each location, do they have a different a speaker for that Sunday morning, or do you guys all go through the same passage, just different speakers on the same passage?
Yeah, so it's different. So some of them are going verse by verse through whole books of the Bible. Some of them are revisiting some passages, some topics from this past year. That like that's what we've done even in the one in my home. We've done some assessment, like where are we when we look at what we see happen in the Bible, where are we weak? Where are there misunderstandings maybe on our part? So it's led us to revisit some things. But just like last year, in one in my house, we were going verse by verse through. I think we did the Thessalonian letters, and we did Matthew. I think the year before that. So we've gone through whole books. But each pastor, would be different. And of course, the goal is to have local appointed elders, pastors at each of those. And so we're going through that process with some of them now, even trying to appoint some leaders. That way, you don't have the same 2 or 3 people having to bounce between all of them, especially as we grow and multiply. You want to see it released. So
we'll tell you what, we're coming towards the end of the program here before our break. So hopefully you can stay with me for a minute after during the break. But we'll have you on another time. We're going to have another topic coming on in the next segment. But what's a good website where people can go to find all the different locations? We got about a minute left.
Yeah, it's crosspointutah.com, CROSSPOINTUTAH.com. It's up and live now. We are in the middle of revamping that, so here just in a week or two it'll be a different feel. But yeah, all that information's there, and we'd love to connect with anybody.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate going to the Gospel Conversations class that you did with some other guys, with Tyler Brown up at Ogden Valley Community in Huntsville, and just some real excellent, very biblical, practical ways to carry out the Great Commission and how to share our faith with people. And so if you're interested in that, if you're wanting to get in contact with Pastor Logan, just go to that website, crosspointutah.com. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us here on Passion for Christ. You're listening to AM 820 and 95.3 FM. We'll be back here right after the break on the Truth Radio Network.